For 3,000 years, the Galactic Confederation believed they had cataloged every intelligent species in the known universe. Their vast databases contained the genetic codes, technological capabilities, and cultural histories of over 10,000 civilizations. They had mapped every star system, conquered every habitable world, and enslaved or eliminated any species that dared challenge their supremacy. The humans were supposed to be extinct. According to Confederation records, the primitive bipeds from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star had been wiped out during the Great Purge of 2157. The official report stated that their homeworld had been cleansed after the inhabitants showed dangerous signs of rapid technological advancement and unacceptable aggression levels. The planet Earth was now listed as a dead rock, its surface glassed and lifeless, serving as a warning to other developing species about the price of defiance. But the Confederation had made a terrible mistake. They had only found one human colony. Now, as Admiral Zex Thera of the Confederation's most elite battle fleet stared at the massive vessel that had just decloaked directly in front of his armada, he realized that their 3 millennia of galactic dominance was about to come to a very sudden and very violent end. The ship was impossibly large, easily dwarfing his flagship, and it bore markings that made his blood run cold. The image of a blue and green planet, and below it, in letters that somehow translated perfectly into every language simultaneously, a single word that would haunt the galaxy forever: vengeance. Admiral Zex Thera's 6 eyes focused on the tactical display, his scaled hands gripping the command throne's armrests with enough force to leave permanent indentations in the reinforced metal. The bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Dominion buzzed with activity as his crew scrambled to make sense of what their sensors were telling them. The massive vessel hanging in space before them defied every law of physics the Confederation understood. It measured nearly 50 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface, glowing with a soft blue radiance that pulsed like a heartbeat. Most disturbing of all, their advanced scanners couldn't penetrate its hull to determine crew size, weapons capacity, or even basic structural composition. Communications Officer Velnari, Zex Thera commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. Transmit standard first contact protocols, demand identification, and intent. The slender Veltorian at the communications console worked frantically, her tentacle-like fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "Sir, I'm broadcasting on all known frequencies, but there's no response." "Wait," her voice trailed off as her console erupted in cascading lights. "Admiral, they're responding, but not through our communications array. They're broadcasting directly to every ship in the fleet simultaneously." Before Zex Thera could ask for clarification, the main view screen flickered and changed. The image of the mysterious ship disappeared, replaced by something that made the entire bridge fall silent. A human face stared back at them. The creature was tall by galactic standards, with pale skin marked by several scars and eyes the color of winter ice. Its hair was a mixture of brown and gray, cropped short in what appeared to be a military fashion. Most unsettling were those eyes. They held an intelligence that was both familiar and utterly alien, and beneath that intelligence lurked something that made Zex Thera's predatory instincts scream warnings. "Greetings, Admiral Zex Thera of the Galactic Confederation," the human said, its voice carrying perfectly across the bridge despite the impossibility of the transmission method. "My name is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Resistance. I believe we need to talk." Zex Thera's mind reeled. Humans were extinct. He had personally reviewed the extermination reports. The planet Earth was a lifeless rock floating in space, its surface turned to glass by Confederation orbital bombardment. Yet here was undeniable proof that not only had some humans survived, but they had somehow built a vessel that made his own flagship look like a child's toy. "Impossible," he whispered, then caught himself and straightened in his throne. Human, you are speaking to Admiral Zexthara, Supreme Commander of the 5th Conquest Fleet. Your species was eliminated 3 millennia ago for crimes against galactic peace. Surrender yourself for immediate termination, or we will destroy your vessel. The human's expression didn't change, but something shifted in those cold eyes. Admiral, before you make any hasty decisions, perhaps you should check your long-range sensors. Look toward the Kepler system bearing 27 Mark IV. Zexthara gestured to his sensor officer, a nervous Grixnally whose 4 arms moved independently as he adjusted his equipment. The officer's skin changed from blue to a sickly yellow as he processed the readings. "Admiral," the sensor officer stammered, I'm detecting massive signatures throughout the system. Hundreds of them. They appear to be vessels similar to the one we're facing. The human on the screen allowed herself a small, cold smile. Actually, it's closer to 3,000 ships, but who's counting? Admiral, the Galactic Confederation made a critical error 3,000 years ago. You found our newest colony. Barely 50,000 people on a frontier world we've been terraforming for less than a decade. You thought it was our homeworld. Zexthara felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. Pure primal terror that started in his lower stomach and spread through his massive frame like ice water. That's impossible. Our intelligence was perfect. Earth was humanity's origin world. Earth was our origin, yes. But by the time your ships arrived, we had already spread to over 200 worlds across 50 star systems. You killed 50,000 colonists and thought you'd committed genocide. Instead, you gave 11 billion humans a very good reason to hate you. The implications hit Zexthara like a physical blow. If humans had spread that far before the Confederation even knew they existed, if they'd had 3,000 years to develop while nursing a grudge against the galaxy's dominant power, "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Chen's smile grew wider, but it held no warmth whatsoever. "Justice, Admiral. For 3,000 years, the Confederation has told the galaxy that humans were a primitive, violent species. That had to be eliminated for the greater good. You've used our supposed aggression as justification for your own conquests. How many civilizations have you destroyed while claiming you were protecting the galaxy from another human uprising?" Zexthara said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. 47, Chen continued. 47 species completely eliminated. Another 133 enslaved or reduced to client states. All in the name of preventing another human incident. Well, Admiral, the humans have returned, and we've had 3 millennia to think about what we'd like to say to the Galactic Confederation. The view screen split, showing Captain Chen on one side and a tactical display on the other. Zexthara watched in growing horror as hundreds of red dots appeared on the display, each representing a human vessel emerging from stealth or faster-than-light travel. They weren't just in the Kepler system anymore, they were everywhere. His fleet of 50 dreadnoughts, the pride of the Confederation military, was completely surrounded. "Your technology," Zexthara began, "has advanced somewhat since your last encounter with us." "Yes," Chen interrupted. "We've had 3,000 years of focused development, Admiral. 3,000 years of asking ourselves a single question. How do we make the Confederation pay for what they did to us?" The answer, as it turns out, involved a great deal of innovation in the fields of weapons technology, defensive systems, and what your databases probably classify as impossible physics. To demonstrate her point, the human ship performed a maneuver that made Zexthara's engineering officer faint outright. The massive vessel simply vanished from one location and reappeared in another, moving instantaneously across several thousand kilometers of space without any visible method of propulsion. "Quantum displacement," Chen explained casually. "We figured out how to fold space about 800 years ago." Faster-than-light travel became obsolete shortly after that. These days, we can move our ships anywhere within a light-year radius without actually traveling through the intervening space. Zexthara's tactical mind raced through possibilities and found none that ended well for his fleet. What are your terms for surrender? Surrender? Chen's laugh was like breaking glass. Admiral, I think you misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't even a battle. This is an execution. The tactical display updated again, showing energy readings that made Zexthera's blood freeze in his veins. Every human vessel was charging weapons that registered power levels beyond anything in the Confederation's arsenal. However, Chen continued, we're not the monsters you painted us as. You have exactly 10 minutes to broadcast a full confession to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Explain what really happened to humanity. Admit to the genocide of 47 species. Acknowledge that the Confederation's 3,000-year reign of terror was built on lies and murder. And if I refuse, then we demonstrate why the galaxy was right to fear humanity, Admiral. But we'll do it properly this time. Zexthera looked around his bridge at officers who had followed him through dozens of campaigns. Loyal soldiers who had helped him conquer worlds and crush rebellions. They were all looking at him now, waiting for orders that he knew would determine not just their fate, but potentially the fate of the entire galaxy. Communications, he said finally. Open a channel to all Confederation worlds. Full spectrum broadcast. Officer Valnari's tentacles trembled as she established the connection. Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to approximately 12 billion sentient beings across the galaxy. Zexthara stood from his command throne, straightening his ceremonial armor one last time. He had built his career on strength, on the absolute certainty that the Confederation's way was the only way. Now, faced with the return of humanity's children, he realized that everything he had believed was built on a foundation of lies. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, this is Admiral Zexthera of the 5th Conquest Fleet. What I am about to tell you will change everything you believe about the Galactic Confederation, about humanity, and about the last 3,000 years of our shared history. As he spoke, telling the galaxy the truth about genocide and lies, about species destroyed and civilizations enslaved, Zexthara found himself wondering if this was how the universe always ended. Not with a bang, but with the revelation that the monsters had been wearing the wrong faces all along. On the view screen, Captain Chen watched and listened, her ice-blue eyes never leaving his face. Behind her, the impossible human ship hummed with barely contained power, while around them, 3,000 more vessels waited in perfect formation, ready to deliver a justice that was 3 millennia overdue. The age of Confederation dominance was ending, not in glorious battle, but in shameful confession. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 11 billion humans listened to their enemies' words and prepared to decide whether the galaxy deserved the mercy they themselves had never received. The confession lasted 18 minutes and 43 seconds. Across the galaxy, 12 billion beings listened as Admiral Zexthara systematically dismantled 3 millennia of carefully constructed lies. He spoke of the Kepler colony, of 50,000 humans killed not for aggression but for the crime of existing. He detailed the 47 species eliminated in humanity's name, civilizations wiped from existence to justify a narrative of human brutality that had never been true. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Sarah Chen watched the Admiral's face as he spoke. She had studied this moment for decades, imagining what it would feel like to see one of the Confederation's most decorated officers admit to crimes that would make devils weep. She had expected satisfaction, perhaps even joy. Instead, she felt only the weight of responsibility. Captain, her communications officer reported, "We're receiving responses from across the galaxy. The Confederation's client species are demanding explanations. Several Outer Rim governments are declaring independence. There's panic on the core worlds." Chen nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. The Confederation had built their empire on the twin pillars of superior firepower and absolute information control. With one pillar shattered, the other was crumbling rapidly. Any response from the Confederation High Command? "Yes, ma'am." They're ordering Admiral Zexthera to cease transmission and engage us immediately. They're also mobilizing every available fleet for emergency deployment to this sector. How long until they arrive? Based on their fastest ships, approximately 6 hours for the nearest battle group, 12 hours for significant reinforcements. Chen allowed herself a moment to appreciate the irony. The Confederation's rigid command structure, so effective at maintaining control over their vast empire, was now working against them. Every decision had to flow through layers of bureaucracy, every response filtered through committees and councils. Humanity had learned to be more flexible. Admiral Zexthara finished his confession and stood silent on the view screen. His massive frame somehow diminished despite his impressive physical presence. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that would likely be their last. "Admiral," Chen said, her voice carrying easily across the quantum communication link, "your honesty is noted and appreciated. However, words alone cannot undo 3,000 years of systematic murder and oppression. What would you have of me?" Zexthera replied, his voice hollow. "My fleet is at your mercy. I have confessed our crimes to the galaxy. What justice looks like is now your decision." "Justice!" Chen repeated thoughtfully. "Do you know what justice meant to my ancestors, Admiral? It meant accountability. It meant consequences. It meant ensuring that those who committed crimes faced punishment, not to satisfy vengeance, but to prevent future crimes." She gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display updated to show not just the human fleet, but something else entirely. Thousands of smaller vessels were approaching from every direction, their signatures identifying them as ships from dozens of different species. "You see, Admiral, humanity wasn't the only species to survive Confederation justice. We've spent the last 3,000 years finding the others. The survivors, the refugees, the scattered remnants of civilizations you thought you had completely destroyed." Zexthara's eyes widened as he processed the implications. The approaching ships represented species that the Confederation databases listed as extinct, client states that had supposedly been integrated peacefully, primitive cultures that had allegedly been uplifted for their own good. "The Caithara still remember when you burned their ocean worlds," Chen continued. "The Zenth Collective never forgot the slave markets where you sold their children. The Epsilon Commune has been hiding in the void between galaxies for 2,000 years, waiting for this day." "With impossible," Zexthera breathed. "We were thorough. Our records show complete conquest or elimination. Your records show what your superiors wanted them to show," Chen replied. "The truth, Admiral, is that the Confederation has been far less efficient than it claimed. Oh, you destroyed billions of lives, entire homeworlds, centers of civilization. But life, as our species has learned, finds a way to endure." The approaching ships were close enough now for detailed scans. Zexthara's sensor officer, having regained consciousness, read off ship classifications with mounting horror. These weren't refugee vessels or converted civilian ships. These were warships, built with technology that seemed to blend the innovations of dozens of different species. "The Galactic Resistance," Chen explained. 53 species working together, sharing technology and resources, preparing for the day when we would be strong enough to reclaim what was stolen from us. Today is that day, Admiral. "You're planning to invade Confederation space?" "Invade?" Chen's expression shifted to something resembling confusion. "Admiral, you seem to be operating under the assumption that this is Confederation space. But sovereignty requires the consent of the governed, does it not? And as of 18 minutes ago, the government learned that their government has been lying to them about everything for 3 millennia." As if summoned by her words, new signals flooded the communication channels. Worlds throughout the galaxy were broadcasting declarations of independence, renouncing their allegiance to the Confederation, demanding immediate withdrawal of occupation forces. The empire that had taken 3,000 years to build was dissolving in real time. "The humans and our allies didn't come here to conquer, Admiral. We came to liberate." Zexthara slumped back into his command throne, His entire worldview, everything he had fought for and believed in, was crumbling around him. What happens to us? To the Confederation military? To those who served in good faith, believing we were protecting the galaxy? That depends on you, Chen replied. The leadership, those who knew the truth and perpetuated the lies, they will face trial. The evidence of their crimes is extensive, and justice delayed is still justice. But the rank and file, those who served believing they were protecting civilization, they have choices to make. She gestured again, and the tactical display zoomed in on his fleet. Each Confederation vessel now had multiple human ships positioned around it, not aggressively, but clearly in control of the situation. Your soldiers can return to their homeworlds and rejoin their families. They can join the liberation effort, using their skills to help free enslaved populations and restore stolen worlds. Or they can fight for a system that has just been exposed as genocidal and corrupt. But they should understand that if they choose the third option, they will be fighting alone. The Confederation will not surrender, Zexthara said, but his voice lacked conviction. The Confederation as a political entity ceased to exist the moment you finished speaking, Chen replied matter-of-factly. What remains is a collection of military forces and administrative bureaucrats trying to hold together an empire whose foundation has been destroyed. Some will adapt to the new reality, others will not. The communication channels erupted with new activity as ship after ship in Zexthara's fleet began requesting permission to surrender, not to the humans, but to the galactic resistance. Officers and crew who had served the Confederation faithfully were abandoning their posts in droves, unwilling to fight for a cause they now knew was built on genocide and lies. Admiral, Chen continued, I'm going to give you and your remaining forces exactly 1 hour to make your choice. Those who wish to lay down arms and return home may do so freely. Those who wish to join the liberation effort will be welcomed after appropriate vetting. Those who choose to fight will be treated as enemy combatants. And if we choose to fight? Chen's expression hardened, and for a moment Zexthara glimpsed the steel that had allowed humanity to survive 3,000 years of exile and preparation. Admiral, your species evolved on a world with 3 times standard gravity. You're naturally stronger and more durable than most galactic species. Your military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming firepower and brutal efficiency. By galactic standards, you are considered one of the most formidable warrior races in known space. She paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. Humans evolved on a death world where everything was trying to kill us. We survived ice ages that should have wiped us out. We turned our most dangerous predators into pets. We split the atom and walked on our moon before we learned to travel between stars. When we finally reached the galaxy, we were still fighting with projectile weapons and chemical propulsion, but we had already developed the most advanced military strategies in the known universe. The tactical display shifted again, showing detailed scans of the human vessels. The weapon systems alone were beyond Confederation comprehension, but what truly terrified Zexthara was the ship design philosophy. Every human vessel was built like a fortress, with redundant systems, modular construction, and armor that seemed to incorporate materials that shouldn't exist. We had 3,000 years to get angry, Admiral. 3,000 years to plan. 3,000 years to take every piece of technology we could find, adapt it, improve it, and turn it into instruments of liberation. If you choose to fight us, you won't be facing the primitive humans your predecessors massacred. You will be facing the children of Earth, backed by 53 species who have very good reasons to hate everything the Confederation represents. We have 49 ships, Zexthara said weakly. We have 11 billion humans, spread across 300 worlds, supported by 53 species who collectively represent the technological achievements of 8,000 years of suppressed civilization, Chen replied. This is mathematics. The hour that followed was perhaps the longest in Zexthara's life. Ship by ship, his fleet dissolved around him. Some crews abandoned their vessels entirely. using escape pods to reach the human ships and request asylum. Others simply shut down their weapons and shields, broadcasting surrender signals on all frequencies. A few tried to flee, only to discover that human ships could pursue them through dimensions that Confederation science insisted were purely theoretical. By the end of the hour, only 3 vessels remained under Zex Thara's command, his own flagship and 2 heavy cruisers whose captains had apparently chosen loyalty to the Admiral over reason. 1,700 ships, Chen observed, reading from her tactical display. 1,700 crews, who chose surrender or liberation over feudal resistance. Their families will see them again, Admiral. Will yours? Zex Thara looked around his bridge one final time. The officers who remained were those who had served with him longest, soldiers who would follow him into death if he asked it of them. They deserved better than to die for a cause that no longer existed. "Communications!" he ordered, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. "Transmit our surrender to the Galactic Resistance. All remaining ships are to power down weapons and prepare for boarding." As his final order echoed across the bridge, Zex Thara realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, the end of an empire not through conquest or collapse, but through the simple revelation of truth. The age of the Confederation was over. The age of liberation had begun. And somewhere in the depths of space, 3,000 human ships began their journey toward the core worlds, carrying with them the promise of justice that was 3 millennia overdue. The Confederation core worlds had not known war for over 2,000 years. Protected by the galaxy's most powerful military and insulated by layer upon layer of client states and tributary species, the 5 planets that housed the galaxy's ruling elite had become paradises of unimaginable luxury. Their cities stretched across continents, their spires reaching toward the stars, their gardens filled with treasures stolen from 1,000 conquered worlds. Now, as Chancellor Mordeth stood on the observation deck of the Confederation's highest tower, watching human ships materialize in orbit around his homeworld of Zentori Prime, he understood that paradise was about to become a memory. "How many?" he asked his aide, a nervous Veltorian whose tentacles couldn't stop trembling. "Initial count shows 800 vessels in our immediate orbital space," the aide replied, consulting a data tablet with shaking hands. Long-range sensors detect additional fleets approaching the other core worlds. Intelligence estimates place total human forces at over 3,000 ships. Mordeth nodded slowly, his ancient mind trying to process the magnitude of the catastrophe. He had been Chancellor for 600 years, had overseen the conquest of 30 systems, had personally ordered the extinction of 4 species. The idea that any force in the galaxy could threaten the core worlds had become literally unthinkable. "Status of our defense fleets? Gone, sir." Admiral Zex Thara's surrender started a chain reaction. Fleet commanders throughout the Outer Rim are either surrendering to the Resistance or simply abandoning their posts. The few remaining loyal forces are being systematically hunted down by human strike teams. And the client species? The aide's skin shifted to a sickly yellow color. "Revolting, sir. All of them. Even the Grixnali have declared independence, and they've been our most loyal servants for 800 years. The Hegemony Council estimates that we've lost control of 93% of our territory in the last 72 hours. Mordeth turned from the window, his massive frame casting long shadows across the opulent chamber. The Chancellor's office was a monument to 3,000 years of successful imperialism. Walls lined with trophies from conquered worlds, floors made from polished stones that had once been sacred to extinct species, furniture crafted from the bones of creatures that no longer existed anywhere in the galaxy. Recommendations? The military advisors suggest immediate evacuation to the emergency bunkers in the Andromeda sector. If we can reach them, we might be able to organize a resistance movement from there. And intelligence? Director Kixabarth believes we should attempt to negotiate. He thinks the humans might be open to a conditional surrender that preserves some level of Confederation authority. Mordeth's laugh was like the sound of breaking stone. Negotiate? With the survivors of a species we attempted to genocide, what exactly do we have to offer them? Before the aide could answer, every screen in the room activated simultaneously. The Confederation seal faded, replaced by the image of a human woman wearing a simple military uniform. Her hair was silver gray, her face marked by lines that spoke of long experience, and her eyes held the kind of calm confidence that only came from absolute certainty. "Chancellor Mordeth," the human said, her voice carrying clearly through the room's communication system. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez, commander of the Human Liberation Fleet. I believe we need to discuss your surrender." Mordeth straightened to his full height, drawing on centuries of diplomatic experience. "Admiral Vasquez, I am prepared to discuss terms for a cessation of hostilities and a negotiated settlement of our current differences." The human smile was thin and utterly without warmth. "Chancellor, I think there may be some confusion about the nature of this conversation. This is not a negotiation. This is me informing you of the terms of your surrender, which are as follows: unconditional and immediate. You cannot seriously expect the Galactic Confederation to simply cease to exist. Chancellor, the Galactic Confederation ceased to exist 72 hours ago when Admiral Zexthara revealed your crimes to the galaxy. What we're dealing with now is the administrative cleanup of a dead empire." As if to emphasize her point, the room's tactical displays activated, showing the current status of Confederation space. Red zones marked territories in open revolt. Yellow areas indicated regions where local governments had declared neutrality. Green sections showed worlds that had already been liberated by resistance forces. The amount of space still marked in Confederation blue was shockingly small. "Your client species remember what you did to them," Admiral Vasquez continued. "Your tributary worlds know how you've been exploiting them. Your own citizens are learning that their government built prosperity on the bones of murdered civilizations. Tell me, Chancellor, who exactly do you think is going to fight for the Confederation now?" Mordeth gestured to his aide, who quickly pulled up casualty reports on a secondary screen. The numbers were devastating. Not because of human military action, but because Confederation forces were surrendering faster than they could be processed. "What do you want?" Mordeth asked, abandoning diplomatic protocol. "Justice," Vasquez replied simply. 3,000 years of it, starting with trials for war crimes, continuing with reparations for every species you've wronged, and ending with the complete dismantling of every system that allowed the Confederation to commit genocide in the name of galactic peace. "And if we refuse?" The Admiral's expression didn't change, but something in the background of her transmission caught Mordeth's attention. Through the window behind her, he could see the surface of a planet. A blue and green world that looked remarkably like the descriptions of Earth from the old files. "Chancellor, are you familiar with the concept of orbital bombardment?" "Your predecessors certainly were. They used it quite effectively 3,000 years ago against a small human colony. Turned 50,000 people into glass and vapor in a matter of hours." Mordeth felt his blood freeze. "You wouldn't dare. There are 12 billion civilians on the core worlds, and there were 11 billion humans scattered across 200 colonies when your people decided we needed to be eliminated," Vasquez replied. "The difference, Chancellor, is that those civilians can leave. We're not interested in murdering innocents. But the government that ordered the genocide of 47 species? That government will face justice, one way or another." The transmission shifted, showing new images that made Mordeth's aide fall backward in terror. Human ships were deploying some kind of device near each of the core worlds, massive structures that seemed to bend space around them, creating visible distortions in the fabric of reality itself. "Stellar destabilizers," Admiral Vasquez explained conversationally. "We developed them about 400 years ago, based on technology we recovered from one of your victim species. Quite ingenious, really. They can cause a star to go supernova in a controlled manner, completely sterilizing a solar system while leaving the surrounding space perfectly safe. You're talking about destroying entire star systems. I'm talking about ensuring that the Confederation can never again use civilian populations as human shields. You have 48 hours to evacuate all non-essential personnel from the core worlds. After that, we commence cleansing operations. Mordeth stared at the human admiral, trying to find some sign that this was a bluff, some indication that the humans weren't serious about destroying 5 entire star systems. What he saw in those calm, steady eyes was something that terrified him more than any weapon: absolute moral certainty. "The civilians you're threatening to murder are innocent," he said desperately. "So were the 50,000 humans on Kepler Colony," Vasquez replied. "So were the Cathara children who burned in their ocean cities. So were the Zenth researchers who were sold into slavery. So were the 47 species you eliminated to maintain your narrative of human aggression. The difference, Chancellor, is that your civilians have a choice. They can leave." Days. Our people never did. The tactical displays updated again, showing massive evacuation ships approaching the core worlds from every direction. Not human vessels, ships from dozens of different species, all flying under the banner of the Galactic Resistance. "We've prepared transport for every civilian on the core worlds," the Admiral continued. "Basic accommodations, but adequate for temporary relocation while we determine the final disposition of Confederation territories. Those who choose to stay will be considered enemy combatants and treated accordingly." Mordeth's mind raced through possibilities, looking for some angle, some leverage that might change the equation. The other galactic powers will never allow this. The hegemony, the Trade Federation, the independent worlds, they'll unite against a common threat. "Chancellor, we've been in contact with every major galactic government for the past 6 months. Turns out that when you spend 3,000 years conquering and oppressing your neighbors, you don't make many friends. Most of them are openly celebrating your downfall. The few who expressed concern about human expansion were quickly reassured when we shared our plans for post-liberation governance, which are complete withdrawal from galactic politics once justice has been served. Humans have no interest in ruling the galaxy, Chancellor. We just want to make sure no one else can do what you did to us." The conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the building. Mordeth's aide frantically consulted his displays, his skin cycling through several colors, before settling on deep purple, the Veltorian equivalent of shock. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from the other 4 core worlds. The local governments are asking for immediate evacuation assistance. They're offering to cooperate fully with the Galactic Resistance in exchange for clemency for their civilian populations." Mordeth felt the last pillars of his world crumbling. The Confederation had been built on unity among the core worlds, the absolute certainty that they would stand together against any threat, if even his fellow chancellors were abandoning the cause. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "The evacuation ships will complete their operations in 47 hours and 36 minutes, Admiral Vasquez replied, consulting something off-screen. "At that point, we begin final cleansing operations. I should mention that we'll be broadcasting the entire process to every inhabited world in the galaxy, so there's no possibility of creating martyrs or claiming that the Confederation died fighting bravely. And if I surrender, you stand trial for your crimes along with every other member of the Hegemony Council. Fair trials with full legal representation and public proceedings. Some of you will likely face execution for genocide and crimes against sentient life. Others may receive lesser sentences, depending on their level of involvement and cooperation with the transition process." Mordeth looked around his office one final time at the trophies and treasures that represented 3,000 years of successful imperialism. Everything he had worked for, everything his species had built, reduced to a simple choice between surrender and annihilation. "I'll need to consult with the Council," he said finally. "Of course. You have 12 hours for deliberations. After that, we begin individual negotiations with whoever's left. The transmission ended, leaving Mordeth alone with his aide and the weight of a decision that would determine not just his own fate, but the future of galactic civilization itself. Outside the window, human ships continued to arrive, each one a reminder that the age of Confederation dominance was ending, not in glorious battle, but in the simple mathematics of overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The galaxy was about to learn what justice looked like when delivered by a species that had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of righteous vengeance. The Great Hall of Justice on New Geneva Station had been built specifically for this moment. Constructed in the year following the Confederation's surrender, it represented the largest collaborative engineering project in galactic history. 53 species had contributed materials, technology, and expertise to create a structure that could accommodate the trial of an entire government. The hall itself was a marvel of adaptive architecture. The ceiling curved upward in flowing lines that reminded observers of Earth's ancient cathedrals, while the walls incorporated geometric patterns sacred to dozens of different cultures. The floor was made from a unique composite that included materials from every world the Confederation had conquered, creating a literal foundation built from the ashes of their crimes. Former Chancellor Mordeth sat in the defendants section, his massive frame dwarfed by the sheer scale of the chamber around him. To his left and right sat the remaining members of the Hegemony Council, 43 individuals who had collectively ruled the galaxy for centuries. Now they wore simple prison uniforms and magnetic restraints, their former power reduced to nothing more than historical footnote. The prosecutorial team was equally impressive in its diversity. Humans worked alongside Kithara. Zenth Collective members shared research with Epsilon commune survivors, and dozens of other species contributed evidence and testimony to the case against their former oppressors. Leading the prosecution was a human woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, whose ancestors had died in the original massacre at Kepler Colony. The prosecution calls Admiral Zex Thera to the stand, Dr. Kim announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's advanced acoustic system. The former admiral rose from the witness section, his movements careful and deliberate. The past year had changed him dramatically. Gone was the proud military bearing in ceremonial armor. In their place was a being who looked older, smaller, and infinitely more tired. Admiral Zex Thara. Kim began, "You served the Confederation military for 467 years, correct?" "Yes," Zex Thara replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "During that time, you personally oversaw the conquest or destruction of 17 star systems?" "Yes." "Including the complete extinction of 4 sentient species?" "Yes." Dr. Kim gestured to the massive displays that dominated one wall of the chamber. Images appeared showing worlds before and after Confederation. Liberation, thriving civilizations reduced to lifeless rocks, unique biospheres stripped bare for resources, entire cultures erased from existence. "Admiral, did you ever question these orders?" For a long moment, Zex Thera said nothing. The weight of his silence seemed to press down on everyone in the chamber. Finally, he spoke. "No, I believed we were protecting the galaxy from chaos. I believed that strong central authority was necessary to prevent war and suffering. I believed that the sacrifices we demanded were justified by the peace we provided. And now I know that we were the chaos we claimed to be fighting against." The Admiral's words hung in the air like a physical presence. Many in the gallery survivors of Confederation oppression, families of the murdered, representatives of species that had been enslaved or eliminated, leaned forward as if trying to absorb every syllable. "Admiral, tell us about the Velnari campaign, Doctor," Kim continued. Zex Thara's shoulders sagged even further. The Velnari were a peaceful species. They had developed advanced biotechnology that could heal almost any injury or disease. They offered to share it freely with the galaxy. What happened to them? We determined that such technology could destabilize existing medical markets. The Confederation's pharmaceutical industry was worth trillions of credits annually. Free healing technology would have destroyed entire sectors of the economy. So we classified the Velnari as a technological threat and authorized a cleansing operation. We told the galaxy that they were developing biological weapons. The display shifted to show the Velnari homeworld. Before images revealed a paradise of living cities, structures grown rather than built, technology in perfect harmony with nature. After images showed nothing but ash. How long did it take to exterminate the Velnari? 6 days. And their technology? We seized all research data and classified it beyond top secret. It was never shared. Dr. Kim let that revelation settle before continuing. Admiral, how many other species were eliminated for similar economic reasons? 14 that I was personally involved with. I don't know the total number. The prosecution spent the next 3 hours walking through each case, each species, each world that had been sacrificed on the altar of Confederation prosperity. The detail was exhaustive and devastating. Advanced civilizations destroyed because their technology threatened Confederation monopolies. Peaceful species eliminated because their philosophical outlooks challenged Confederation ideology. Entire worlds sterilized because their resources were needed for core world luxury projects. When Dr. Kim finally sat down, the defense attorney, a Confederation loyalist who had volunteered for the thankless task of representing the former government, rose to cross-examine. Admiral Zexthara, you were a soldier following orders, correct? Yes. You believed you were serving the greater good? Yes. The decisions to authorize these operations came from the civilian leadership? Yes. So you were not the architect of these policies, merely their instrument? Zixthara was quiet for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he shook his massive head. No, that's not accurate. The defense attorney blinked in confusion. Admiral, I'm trying to establish that you were following orders. I was following orders, Zexthara interrupted, but I was also giving them. I sat on the Strategic Planning Council. I participated in target selection meetings. I recommended species for elimination based on tactical assessments. I wasn't just following orders, Counselor. I was helping to write them. The attorney sat down heavily, clearly unprepared for a defendant who seemed determined to accept full responsibility for his crimes. Dr. Kim rose for redirect examination. Admiral, why are you cooperating with this tribunal? Because, Zexthara said, his voice growing stronger, because someone needs to tell the truth. For 3,000 years, the galaxy has been fed lies about human aggression, about the necessity of Confederation rule, about the price of peace. Those lies enabled atrocities that dwarf anything in recorded history. Do you believe you deserve mercy? No. I believe I deserve exactly what I gave to billions of innocent beings. Nothing. The gallery erupted in murmurs and whispers as Zexthara's words sunk in. This wasn't the defiant last stand of a defeated military leader. This was something unprecedented in galactic history, a complete moral reckoning by one of the perpetrators themselves. The trial continued for months. Witness after witness took the stand. Survivor after survivor told their stories. Expert after expert explained the technological and cultural treasures that had been lost forever. The evidence was overwhelming, the guilt undeniable, the scope of the crimes beyond imagination. But it was the testimony of the human witnesses that truly transformed the proceedings from a simple trial into something approaching a galactic healing process. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now retired from military service, spoke about the 3,000 years of exile, how humanity had struggled to maintain its identity while building new homes among the stars, how they had carefully preserved every scrap of information about Earth, every piece of their cultural heritage, every memory of the world they had lost. Captain Sarah Chen described the moment they first learned what had truly happened at Kepler Colony. How the survivors had had to confront the fact that their entire civilization had been branded as genocidal based on a lie. How they had chosen justice over vengeance, even when vengeance would have been easier. Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead prosecutor, closed the case with a statement that would be quoted in history books for millennia to come. This tribunal isn't about punishment, though. Punishment is necessary. It isn't about vengeance, though vengeance would be understandable. This tribunal is about ensuring that never again can a government commit genocide in the name of peace. Never again can the strong exterminate the weak and call it justice. Never again can fear and hatred masquerade as galactic security. She gestured toward the defendants, then toward the gallery filled with survivors and representatives from across the galaxy. The Confederation taught the galaxy to fear humanity. They used that fear to justify 3,000 years of oppression and murder. Today, we replace that fear with something the galaxy has never truly had: accountability. The verdicts, when they came, surprised no one. 43 counts of genocide, thousands of counts of crimes against sentient life, conspiracy to commit systematic oppression on a galactic scale. The sentences ranged from life imprisonment to execution, depending on each defendant's level of involvement and cooperation with the tribunal. Chancellor Mortheth received the death penalty, carried out by quantum dissolution, the same method the Confederation had used to execute dissidents for centuries. Admiral Zexthara, despite his cooperation, received life imprisonment, a decision that sparked debate throughout the galaxy about the relationship between justice and redemption. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in what happened next. The galactic resistance, having served its purpose, formally disbanded. The freed species began the long process of rebuilding their civilizations. New trade agreements were negotiated based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Research that had been suppressed for millennia was released to the scientific community, and humanity, after 3,000 years of exile, finally began the journey home. The first human ships to return to Earth's solar system found something unexpected. The planet that the Confederation had described as a lifeless rock was showing signs of recovery. Life, it seemed, had indeed found a way. In the depths of the ocean, in protected valleys, in caves deep beneath the surface, Earth's biosphere had endured. The homecoming was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by trillions of beings who had spent their entire lives believing that Earth was nothing more than a cautionary tale about the price of defying the Confederation. Instead, they watched human children play in grass that was growing in the ruins of ancient cities. They watched tears of joy as people breathed the air of their ancestral home for the first time. They watched a species that had every right to hate the galaxy instead choose to heal it. The age of the Confederation was over. The age of justice had begun, and somewhere in the void between stars, new voices were singing songs that had been silent for 3,000 years. Songs of hope, of healing, and of a future where strength served justice instead of the other way around. 25 years had passed since the fall of the Galactic Confederation. The universe that emerged from its ashes bore little resemblance to the rigid hierarchical empire that had dominated the galaxy for 3 millennia. In its place had grown something unprecedented in galactic history, a true democracy of species, built on cooperation rather than conquest. Dr. Maya Chen Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the New Geneva diplomatic station, watching the morning traffic flow between the hundreds of vessels from dozens of different species. Her grandmother had been Captain Sarah Chen, the woman who first revealed humanity's survival to Admiral Zexthara. Her other grandmother had been Admiral Elena Vasquez, who had overseen the Confederation's surrender. The weight of that legacy was something Maya carried with quiet pride and profound responsibility. "Impressive sight, isn't it?" came a familiar voice from behind her. Maya turned to see Ambassador Kexthara approaching, his movements slow but dignified despite his advanced age. The former Confederation admiral had served 15 years of his life sentence before being granted early release for his cooperation with the Transitional Authority. He had spent the last decade working as a senior advisor on post-conflict reconciliation, helping other former oppressor species come to terms with their histories. "Every time I see it, I'm amazed," Maya replied, gesturing toward the traffic patterns outside. 57 species, all working together voluntarily, no central authority forcing cooperation, no military threats maintaining order. Just beings choosing to be better than their histories. Kexthara nodded, his 6 eyes focusing on a particularly interesting sight, a massive Kithara bioship sharing docking space with a sleek human research vessel, while nearby a Zenth collective hive ship coordinated traffic flow with mechanical precision. "Your species taught us something important," he said quietly. "You taught us that justice and mercy aren't opposites. They're partners." "How so?" "The Confederation never understood the difference between justice and vengeance. We thought strength meant the ability to destroy our enemies completely, but when you had us completely at your mercy, when you could have done to us exactly what we had done to you, you chose something different." Maya smiled, remembering the stories her grandmothers had told her. "They chose to build something better." "Exactly. And in doing so, you proved that true strength isn't the ability to destroy, it's the ability to create." Their conversation was interrupted by an aide approaching with a data tablet. "Dr. Chen Vasquez, the morning briefing is ready. Today's agenda includes the Andromeda Sector Integration Proposal, the new trade protocols with the Outer Rim Cooperatives, and the Earth Restoration Project Status Report." Maya accepted the tablet, scanning through the daily summary of galactic affairs. The Andromeda Sector, former Confederation loyalists who had spent 2 decades in exile, were finally ready to rejoin galactic society. The process was delicate, requiring careful balance between accountability for past crimes and recognition of genuine cultural change. "Any major concerns?" she asked. "The usual," the aide replied. "Some species are still nervous about former Confederation worlds having voting rights in the Galactic Assembly. The Centauri Collective is threatening to withdraw from the trade agreements if the Andromedas Group receives full membership status." Kextada made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. 25 years, and they still don't trust us. "Can't say I blame them." "Trust has to be earned," Maya agreed, "but it also has to be given eventually, or there's no point to any of this." She gestured toward the massive chamber visible through the station's transparent walls, the Galactic Assembly Hall, where representatives from every member species debated policies that affected trillions of lives. Unlike the Confederation's rigid hierarchy, the Assembly operated on principles of consensus and voluntary compliance. It was messy, inefficient, and frequently frustrating. It was also the freest government in galactic history. "Speaking of trust," Maya continued, "have you seen the latest reports from Earth?" Kexthara's expression brightened noticeably. The Earth Restoration Project had become something of a personal passion for the former admiral, one of many ways he tried to atone for his role in the original destruction. "The oceanic recovery is ahead of schedule," Maya reported, reading from her tablet. "Marine life has returned to 73% of pre-bombing levels. The atmospheric processing is nearly complete. Another 5 years and Earth will be fully habitable again. And the cities? New Terra and New Geneva are thriving. Population just passed 2 million humans, plus about 300,000 beings from other species who've chosen to make Earth their home." This was perhaps the most remarkable development of the post-Confederation era. Earth had become not just humanity's restored homeworld, but a symbol of renewal for the entire galaxy. Beings from species that had once been enemies now lived and worked together on the planet that had started the whole conflict. "Any word from the deep space expeditions?" Kexthara asked. Maya's expression grew more serious. "That's more complicated. The exploration fleets have made contact with 17 previously unknown civilizations in the past year alone. Most are primitive by galactic standards, but 3 appear to have achieved interstellar travel. And 2 were peaceful first contacts. The Harmony Seekers seem genuinely interested in joining the galactic community. The Epsilon Builders are more cautious, but they're willing to establish limited trade relations. And the 3rd?" Maya sighed, calling up tactical reports on her tablet. "The Dominion of Korthis. Aggressive expansionist empire, about 30 star systems, population of roughly 8 billion across 6 different enslaved species. They've been conquering their neighbors for the past 400 years. Kexthara was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. Another confederation. Smaller, but yes. Same basic pattern. Military superiority used to justify systematic oppression. Enslaved populations. Ideology based on racial supremacy. The exploration fleet's xenologists estimate they're about where the Confederation was 2,000 years ago. What's the Assembly's position? That's what today's emergency session is about. The Korthis have already attacked 2 of our exploration vessels. They seem to view contact with the galactic community as a threat to their local dominance. Maya and Kexthara made their way to the Assembly Hall, joining the stream of delegates, advisors, and observers flowing into the massive chamber. The hall itself was a masterpiece of inclusive design, with environmental controls and seating arrangements adapted for dozens of different species' needs. The session was called to order by the current Assembly Speaker, a Zenth Collective representative whose mechanical voice carried easily through the hall's acoustics. The Assembly recognizes Dr. Maya Chen Vasquez, Special Advisor on Human Affairs, to present the situation report. Maya rose and walked to the central podium, looking out at the sea of faces, or sensory organs, or optical arrays that represented the galaxy's determination to govern itself through reason rather than force. Delegates, we face a situation that tests the fundamental principles of our post-Confederation society. The Dominion of Korthis represents everything we've fought to eliminate from galactic civilization. They are, by any reasonable measure, following the same path of conquest and oppression that made the Confederation a threat to all free peoples. She gestured to the displays that showed maps of Korthis space, images of enslaved populations. However, we must also acknowledge that the Korthis have not directly threatened any member species of our assembly. Their crimes are committed within their own territory, against populations that were conquered before we even knew they existed. This raises profound questions about our responsibilities and limitations. A delegate from the Kethara Commonwealth raised a tentacle for recognition. Does the advisor recommend military intervention? I recommend that we learn from our own history, Maya replied carefully. The Confederation believed that their superior technology gave them the right to impose their will on other species. We cannot fight oppression by becoming oppressors ourselves. Then what do you propose? Asked a Veltorian representative. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would shape galactic policy for generations to come. I propose that we do what the Confederation never did. Give them a choice. We broadcast our history to the Korthis territories. We tell them what the Confederation tried to do to humanity and what happened when humanity and its allies finally said enough. We show them the galaxy we've built in the aftermath of liberation. And then we let them decide what kind of civilization they want to be. The hall erupted in discussion as delegates debated the proposal. Some argued for immediate military action to free the enslaved populations. Others insisted that intervention would make the assembly no different from the Confederation. Still others suggested economic isolation and containment. After 6 hours of debate, the vote was called. By a narrow margin, the Assembly approved Maya's proposal, with the additional provision that refugee assistance would be provided to any being seeking to escape Korthis territory. The broadcast went out 3 days later, transmitted simultaneously to every inhabited world in Korthis space. It told the story of humanity's survival, of the Confederation's lies, of the galaxy's liberation. It showed images of former enemies working together, of species thought extinct rebuilt and thriving, of a universe governed by cooperation rather than conquest. The response was immediate and dramatic. Within hours, refugee ships began streaming out of Korthis space. Enslaved species that had endured centuries of oppression suddenly saw hope for the first time. Rebellions erupted on a dozen worlds as subjugated populations realized that freedom was possible. The Korthis government's response was predictable. They declared the broadcast an act of war and mobilized their military for a strike against what they assumed was just another rival empire. They expected to face ships and weapons similar to their own. Instead, the first Korthis attack fleet encountered something unprecedented in their history: Humans who had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of defending the innocent against overwhelming odds. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the surviving Korthus ships found themselves surrounded by vessels representing 30 different species, all flying under the banner of the Galactic Assembly. They were given the same choice that Admiral Zextara had received 25 years earlier: surrender and face justice, or be destroyed as enemies of free civilization. The Korthus admiral chose surrender. 6 months later, the former Dominion territories had been transformed into the Korthus Liberation Zone, with former slaves now governing their own worlds and the former oppressor class learning to live as equals rather than masters. It wasn't easy, and the process would take decades to complete, but the pattern had been established. Maya stood once again on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the morning traffic flow between hundreds of ships. Among them now were vessels from the former Korthus territories, their crews still learning to navigate a galaxy where strength served justice rather than the other way around. "Another successful liberation," Kexthara observed, joining her at the observation window. "Another step toward a better galaxy," Maya agreed. "But I wonder sometimes if we'll ever truly be done. There will always be another oppressor, another tyrant, another species that believes might makes right." "Perhaps," Kexthara replied, "but there will also always be beings willing to stand up to them. Your grandmothers proved that justice can triumph over evil. You've proven that it can be sustained across generations. Future generations will prove that it can spread across the universe." Maya smiled, thinking of the exploration fleets pushing further into unexplored space, carrying with them the message that freedom was possible, that cooperation was stronger than conquest, that the universe could be a place where strength served justice rather than the other way around. The age of oppression was ending, one liberation at a time. The age of cooperation was spreading, one species at a time. And somewhere in the depths of space, children of 100 different worlds were growing up in a universe where the strong protected the weak, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared, where the future belonged to those who chose to build rather than destroy. The human ship had revealed itself 25 years ago, and the revelation had indeed shattered galactic arrogance. In its place had grown something unprecedented in the history of the universe. A civilization based not on the dominance of the strong, but on the cooperation of the free. It was, Maya thought, exactly what her grandmothers would have wanted.